Hello and welcome to Nikon Report, your weekly roundup of all the latest Nikon news and all other photographic announcements that we found interesting. It's Konstantin here.
This is Becky.
It's number 51. It's going to be a short one because last week we had 3 weeks worth of announcements and this week we only have 1 week and it didn't have many news.
So the first one up is actually the 400mm. There is the supposition that we might be seeing the new Z 400mm f2.8 TCVR S lens very, very soon. We don't know how soon because this is just a rumor. But you were pointing out that the lens was announced a few months ago.
That's right. So on 28th of October, with a bunch of other announcements, they announced the development announcements of the 400mm. So with all Nikon development announcements, we saw 3 to 4 months, at least with all current Z lenses. So 22 and 40mm lenses came out pretty much a couple of months after the announcements as well.
Yeah.
So it seems like it follows the pattern, which I think an improvement over development announcements in the past. For example, D6 or Z9 was announced and then it took them about a year to bring them into fruition to actually get the announcement released. So,
that's right. So we would guesstimate around maybe February, something like that?
Yes, I think so. And then we should expect the 800mm as well. And to be honest with you, I think we will see a lot of releases before the end of financial year. And we talked about this in the past. They talked about 30 lenses by the end of 2022, which basically ends on 31st of March. So I think a lot of those things will be released before then. So hopefully that's going to be the case. But also on the back of this and talking about the upcoming lenses as well, the internet detectives look at the silhouettes of the Nikon Z lineup and they've determined the weight of the lenses as well as the filter diameters.
Yes. So just to explain, they don't actually have any inside skinny, but they have taken the outline or the, as you said, the silhouettes of the lenses that are yet to be announced. They've compared them with the lenses that have already been announced that they already know the parameters of. So they know the diameter, they know the aperture. And then they've worked out some little equation and gone, well, this lens relative to this lens must be this size. So therefore the aperture is blah and the weight will be blah. It's all just supposition and guessing at this point, and it does kind of base itself off the assumption that the roadmap is going to be the size of the lenses that come out. But I think, you know, if you're interested in that, we'll include the link so that you can have a little look. We won't read through it, but they're guessing, for example, that the 200 to 600 is going to be an f6.3.
Yeah, and then they say 100mm diameter. I think based on 200 to 500 lens, it probably will be 95.
Yes.
So that will match. And then 400mm is also expected to be 95mm diameter. But also, forums like BGC Forum, they looked at 800mm lenses, and according to them looking at the silhouette, they estimated to be 2.3 or 2.5 kilograms.
Not too bad for an 800mm.
Absolutely.
So we will include the link there so you can have a little look. And if you're interested in the mathematics behind it, then that's a fun read for an afternoon.
Absolutely. And so could be completely wrong, but it's fun, isn't it? The next one up is the one that we're probably going to do on the weekly basis, and it's Z9 shipping updates.
Yes, we should have our own segment called Z9 shipping.
Shall we have a jingle?
Z9 shipping updates. Oh dear. Okay, so NPS USA have informed their customers that the next batch is due to be shipped shortly. They are preparing it. We know that in the UK, we are hoping for another, albeit small batch before the end of the month. It's not nearly as generous as the US is shipping, unfortunately, or shipments, I should say. But we will do what we can with what we have.
Absolutely. There are a couple of things as well. So in USA, apparently there's a third shipment coming, and that's been confirmed via Pulse Photo Dealer. So they sent out an email. So we haven't heard about the third shipment at all. So we're still talking about the second one, which is yet to come. And then also Nikon UK states that the main shipment delay is based on worldwide chip shortage. We've heard that before, but also a container backlog.
Yes.
So basically Brexit.
Well, yeah. So there is a shortage of shipping containers for a number of things because of COVID, actually.
Oh,
not
I see.
because
Okay.
of Brexit.
Okay.
I mean, we've talked about it's like a bingo card worth of what is wrong with the shipments, why are they delayed? But essentially there was a higher demand for goods in general during lockdown because people were at home and needed certain goods, and there was also therefore a shortage of shipping containers to put things into to then ship them. So there's that as well. So it does sound like we do have some cameras waiting to be shipped and that it's just a matter of getting them to us. As our UK and Europe viewers will know, cameras come from Asia into the Netherlands, and then, for example, in the UK, they get shipped from the Netherlands to here, and they have that extra Brexit backlog. where now there's even more regulations thanks to Brexit. Yay.
I would call it extra Brexit bonus.
Extra Brexit bonus. I like that. And then obviously for dealers on the continent, then the Netherlands ship directly to France, Germany, Spain, etc.
Yeah. So generally Europe hopefully will get their shipments a little bit faster because they don't have to jump through the hoops of all the documentation that the Brexit now requires to European companies to provide to the customs.
Exactly.
Now, also, Tom Hogan in his article about Z9 delivery cites that Nikon has different branches, obviously United States, European and Asian branches, and they generally don't talk to each other. And generally allocations are being decided in Japan, and basically USA got the whole month of production of Z9, and there's been rumored at 3,500 units, and obviously it's based on the buying power view. So obviously there's a lot more demand in the United States. Obviously it's a bigger country as well. So, and effectively that looks like that at the moment United States being prioritized, as well as NPS is being prioritized there as well. In UK, it seems like NPS is being prioritized, but there's no clear announcement on that one. So we still hope Nikon will release a certain statements stating what's happening with those orders. But hopefully the good news is we are starting to see the shipments. Hopefully they'll continue to be on a bi-weekly basis.
Yes.
And that means hopefully everyone gets their cameras hopefully soon enough.
Hopefully. You said hopefully like 20 times. Hopefully. And hopefully. And hopefully.
And hopefully we're going to finish the podcast soon as well. All right, the next one up. Well, there's a little expo that happens in Las Vegas every year. It's called CES. It's not big, it's huge partly. But a lot of companies decided not to attend this year. So among them is Nikon, instead of attending the CES this year. What they did is they launched a website which shows all the achievements throughout the year. So effectively, it's not just the cameras and lenses, it's also microscope business. It's also the motion arm technology, which is MRMC. All that is there. Have a look. I believe Canon and Sony has attended CES, but we haven't seen any sort of announcements on that.
No.
CES stands for Consumer Electronics Show, and it's one of the biggest electronic shows in the world. Maybe not. Maybe yes.
Who knows? But anyway.
All right. We also have
another internet detective.
Yes.
They're out in full force today.
Yes. I would call them Detective Pikachus.
So another Detective Pikachu has spotted a picture of the Nikon Z9 with the Blackmagic external recorder. It's actually on Nikon India's official website. So it seems that we might see the Blackmagic recorder, which will record BRAW.
Yeah, or BRAW.
BRAW, very, very soon.
Absolutely. So more firmware updates to come. Now let's go to some tests and reviews of Z9. So first one up is Gordon Strand published Z9 ISO test on his website, where he compared it to ISO performance of Z9, Z6, and D850. Here's the quick takeaway from this article. He says, in conclusion, we can see that Nikon Z9 seems to perform really good, almost on par with Nikon Z6 Mark II, and much better than Nikon D850. I need to do further tests to see the performance out in the field, but the first quick test looks really promising.
Very interesting.
Well, it's kind of easy to understand though. Z6 Mark II is low resolution cameras. So because of that, it performs a little bit better in low light.
Yes.
However, Z9 is not far from it. And it's also apparent it performs better than D850.
Yeah, well, I mean, as a shooter in low light, I have found that my Z6 performs better than my D850 did in low light. But they're not, the D850's never been touted as a low light performance camera. But the Z9 being the resolution that it is, on par with the D850, then also being as good as the Z6/Z6 II is obviously down to the processor. Not anything else necessarily.
Absolutely. And obviously, if you look at the kings of low light, D6 is still better than Z9. So Z9 has what they call dual gain ISO sensor. So effectively, you get slightly lower dynamic range up to about 500 ISO, and then you get a kind of jump at 500. So you get the improvement there. But if you kind of look at the camera that does it all, Z9, I wouldn't even call it compromise. It's such a good mix that does everything. Yes, if you just, let's say, a studio portrait or portrait photographer, and you shoot up to, let's say, 400 ISO, then stick to the 7 Mark II. It will give you the best dynamic range. However, Z9 is not too far. And then if you shoot extremely low light, then maybe stick to D6 or Z6 Mark II. But then if you look at the autofocus performance, I would still use Z9 in low light over Z6 Mark II, just based on the AF performance by itself. Yeah,
it is interesting, actually, that the Z9 is kind of ticking the boxes for more and more different types of photographer. Another, maybe interesting, maybe not, video is by Family of Tech on YouTube. They've done a Z9 versus Sony A1 rolling shutter in 8K performance test.
Yes, from that video, it looks like they perform about the same. However, Z9 is cheaper, which is a good thing. And then if you look at the focus briefing, which Nikon states in their press releases that they say we pretty much made sure that the focus briefing is minimal on all their Z lenses. That perhaps put Z series cameras, or Z9 in this case, in very competitive position for video work versus Sony.
Exactly. Next up, we have the Z9 real-world autofocus demonstration, a test for action and wildlife by Steve Matthias on YouTube.
Okay, well, he's a wildlife photographer, and he basically does all those autofocus tests with the subject coming towards the camera. So one of the tidbits I found very interesting, he showed 35 frames of a dog running towards him, and he said 30 of those shots, autofocus was nailed completely, and then 3 of those shots were kind of, the focusing system kind of missed the spot just a little bit, and then 2 or 3 shots, he says, it's actually the problem was him and not the camera, which is, I think, is a really good performance of Z9.
That's an excellent hit rate for something which, with any other camera, pretty much, considering the speed of even the D6 and the D5, I don't know what he's comparing it with, but other cameras usually get much higher miss rate than that.
That's the thing. And the shots are of a dog running towards him. So the distance is shortening really, really fast.
Yeah.
So a lot of cameras are struggling in this particular situation. If you're shooting, let's say, from left to right or something like this, that's not an issue. But when the subject coming towards you, that's where the camera, basically AF system, has to perform at its extreme.
Yeah, exactly. Then Matt Granger, Australian wildlife photography, did a YouTube video on the Z9 with the 100 to 400. The lucky duck managed to get 100 to 400 in his hands as well.
Yeah, those are difficult to come by at the moment.
So do go and have a little look at that, particularly if you like Australian wildlife.
Then the next one up is ZP Productions, who we mentioned last week. He does a lot of Z9 testing with other cameras at the moment, which is quite good. So he, this time, compared different types of RAW on Z9 cameras. So he basically says he doesn't see much difference between lossless RAW compression and high efficiency RAW. He also says that while he's done some tests and they're not, let's say, he says I would need to spend a bit more time.
Sure, so they're not like definitive tests.
Exactly, but from what he sees so far, he says I either don't see any difference or almost no difference between the two. At the same time, he says, well, I still prefer to use high efficiency star option, which is the high quality one of high efficiency RAW, just to be on the safe side. And that leads us to the question back, like if you have a Z9, what RAW setting would you use yourself?
So at the moment, from when I've had one in my hands and we've done tests with it, I have quite literally just gone on full lossless compressed RAW. Although I think from a more practical standpoint, if I owned a Z9 and I was going to be going and doing a shoot with it, I probably wouldn't do that. I would go for high efficiency star, as it's called. How about you?
Well, I think that if I would have Z9, I probably wouldn't shoot at 20 frames per second. So I wouldn't use a camera as a sports and wildlife photographer. It's just not the photographer I am. So, So in terms of this, I would probably stick it to the highest possible, which is lossless compressed.
Yeah.
So, and in this case, I could be wrong on this one, but again, it's just kind of my brain tells me use the highest possible quality. Even if the difference is negligible, I always would shoot, let's say on the 850, I would shoot 14-bit uncompressed, while lossless compressed was basically the same thing. I would still shoot uncompressed. So in terms of this, it's just, again, it's my brain telling me to be on the safe side. It's not necessarily the right thing to do, but it's an interesting to see more comparisons. So I will definitely monitor the situation. I will see as many reports on this as possible.
Yeah, and also when we can, it would be a good idea for us to run our own tests and also see if we can see a difference, particularly when using different, because obviously we use different post-processing software and raw files get handled differently when brought into Lightroom, for example, or brought into NX Studio, as it's called
Absolutely.
now.
So get our digital magnifying glass out and be a proper detective pick and choose.
Yeah.
Fantastic. The next one up, we have more tests. So we got a wildlife photographer, Bill Maynard, published his Nikon Z9 autofocus settings guide for birds in flight photography.
Very, very handy. Now, moving on to the 24-120 f4Z, we have one review. This is from Brad Hill. He's posted his early impressions and thoughts on his blog.
Let's see what he says.
Yes.
In conclusion, he says that he's finally happy to have a 24-120 lens that's actually promise a true 24-120 performance. I mean, all previous 24-120 lenses were rubbish, let's be honest, especially their 4G.
Actually, of all of them, that's the best one. So there.
It was the best one.
Yes.
I mean, when you have to choose between like the least evil of all, I guess 24-120 f4G would be good enough.
I loved my 24-120 f4. I'm just not letting you diss it. So a couple of things that I wanted to highlight. He says, if I narrow down the discussion to nature and wildlife photographers, another huge positive about the 24-120 f4 is how well it can complement other key lenses in the kit. The most obvious example for those who have transitioned to the Z system would be the new 100-400. In carrying just the 24-120 and the 100-400 in a field, you kind of have a tremendous range of photographic scenarios, so you can cover everything from landscape to tighter wildlife work. He also said a little bit later, because there are so many different types of photographers out there, each with differing standards and needs, and I'm only one shooter with my own quirks and idiosyncrasies, I always hesitate to recommend any lens to anyone. Instead, I'm simply going to say that I'm thrilled to have this lens in my own kit and wouldn't mind one bit if I didn't see it in any of my competitors' kits.
Very humble, Brad Hill, very humble.
That's quite a high recommendation coming from him, though. So from brief experience with the 24-120
yes,
so far,
tell me.
just like immediate impression.
She's got one.
Yeah.
I don't.
It is just from the raw files that I've seen so far, it is better than the F-mount version. Much higher contrast,
I mean,
sharper,
that's a given, let's be honest, but yeah.
Sharper, quicker to focus, but I do want to put it through its proper paces again, because I sold my F-mount version
Thank God for that.
last year. God, just like keep just driving that one into the ground. So when we get a chance, I'd like to do some direct comparisons, the old brick wall test, but also just comparing the color contrast. But autofocus speed is considerably faster as well. And I do like the size and handling of it. It's very close to the 24-70 f4.
That's true. So tell me, in terms of focal distance, I know you prefer 24-120 over 24-70. So tell me, why do you prefer this focal distance?
I find it a bit more general purpose. Also, I don't tend to carry around a telephoto lens unless I'm doing something specific, like if I'm going to do wildlife photography, then I will take a telephoto lens. But as a walkabout lens, sometimes I find 70 just a little bit too short, and the 24-120 is just that extra, it's a whole 50 mil extra. It does quite a lot.
That's true.
Yeah, and it manages to sort of tighten the shot a bit more for you if you have a scenario that needs it.
That's true. We've discussed it between us, not on the podcast before, but when we were talking about how we recommend the lens, how we choose the lens that we like or not, and I was always saying that I look at it, can this lens perform in a professional environment? And that's why, let's say, 2.8 zoom Trinity is the best option over f4 equivalents. And you said that you look at them from the casual point of view, so something that you can take with you, let's say, on a day trip, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So would you tell me, from your experience so far, how do you rate 24-120 f4? Do you think it's close to 2.8 24-70 performance or not?
I think it's a happy medium between the 24-70 f4 and the 24-70 2.8 in terms of sharpness performance. Without actually doing side-by-side pixel peeping tests, I couldn't tell you for sure whether or not it's much closer to the 24-70 f2.8, but my assumption is that it's going to be closer to the 24-70 f4 in terms of performance, partly because of the price point, but also just the size and the lens construction.
Absolutely. Remember, in the past with F-mount versions, we had kind of people split into groups. So some people were saying that 24-70 2.8 G or E version at the end was significantly better F4G version, but we also had people saying that F4G 24-120 performs almost as well as 24-70, and we had people returning 24-120s and buying 24-70s and vice versa as well.
Yeah, it was definitely a mixed bag on the F-mount version.
Absolutely. I think definitely this test is something interesting to look at, but also I think once the 28-75 2.8 is out, it would be interesting to compare the 24-120 f4 versus 28-75, because one is 2.8, one is f4.
True.
But because they're in a very similar price bracket, it would be very interesting to see how those lenses perform side by side.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we will do that in an otherwise idle moment.
Absolutely. Speaking of 28-75 2.8 lens, according to Nikon Rumours, the lens is expected to start shipping next week in Asia. So very interesting to see. In the United States, a lot of dealers report 31st of January as the date of shipping. In UK, Do we have any date whatsoever at the moment?
No, they did say end of January originally during the announcement, but we all know that that can change. So we don't have an official date yet.
So at the moment, we say 31st. As we said, a lot of those things like dates on the website, the shipping dates, are not set in stone. And we saw it with Z9 and B&H thing. We saw the Yodobashi quote in October 22 for the deliveries, etc., etc.
That's right.
Those could be just a placeholders. They're not necessarily the real dates of shipping as well.
Exactly. Now for some third-party releases, we have Viltrox, who released firmware updates for the AF33mm f1.4 and the 56mm f1.4 Z lenses. Apparently on the 56mm, the firmware update fixed the problem of boot failure in some cases.
Do they have like a reset button like on the PCs?
Something like that. Yeah. And then the 33mm lens firmware update optimized focus performance and improved stability.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you throw improved stability at me, I'll take it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, a bit of news for our UK viewers. The next big photography event we will have in terms of expos, the Society of Photographers 2022 convention will be held in March this year from 16th of March till 19th of March. It will be held in Hammersmith in Novotel Hotel. So for some of you who are London-based, you're welcome to register yourself and visit the show.
A little bit of sad news for you now. Nokishita Twitter account has been closed.
Oh. All right. Well, let's discuss this. So a lot of Nikon rumors as well, the other manufacturers' rumors came through Nokishita. It's a polarizing thing because a lot of people say, well, I don't want to hear any rumors because obviously that brings a lot of hype to things that may not be real because some rumors are true, some rumors are not. So, and we tend to get all rumors as the truth. So
that's how the internet works.
Exactly. So my question is it a good thing or bad thing?
I think Nokishita maybe isn't the most well-known rumor site, but it was quite useful sometimes for steering us in the vague direction of where things were coming from. Were there situations where they were wrong? Probably. Well,
yes and no. I can tell you that I used Nokishita for our Z9 launch video, which we had to get out basically after the live stream. So I think the Nikon Europe live stream was at 1 o'clock. So we had to get the video out for 2 o'clock just to be in trend. So you want to get your video out as soon as possible. Our problem with that video was we didn't have the camera and we didn't have the images because all the press information was released at 1 o'clock.
Yes.
So realistically, you wouldn't be able to put all those images into the video and then render it, which takes normally an hour at full 4K, and then upload it, which will take another hour. And with UK internet, it's probably even longer. So,
Yes.
So if you look at this, actually, Nokishita had those official press images in high resolution out at, I think, something like 7 or 8 a.m. in the morning. Yeah. And from our point of view, that helped me a lot because then we could definitely make the video look a lot better than just us talking heads without any graphics at all.
Yes, it's very true. So that was helpful for us for sure. I wonder why they closed. I mean, if you go onto the Twitter account now, it just says doesn't exist. So
that's true. But from another point of view, we're talking about hype. A lot of rumors bring a lot of hype and a lot of unrealistic expectations. So let's talk about Z6 II and Z7 II rumored firmware with those focus improvements.
Did that come from Nokishita?
Not necessarily. So I don't remember who it came from, but this rumor came, and it was published on Nikon Rumors, Now, it has not been confirmed anywhere else. So either it's true or not, we don't know. But everyone expects it as a given. Every article being published or everything we publish, people say, oh, I'm surprised no one talks about, that 6.2 firmware with those focus improvements. So the question is, because it has not been confirmed anywhere, is it fair for us to expect for Nikon to release that or not? So that's where I'm coming from. So we got rumors that bring the positive side of things, and we have rumors that bring a lot of unnecessary expectations.
I see what you mean there.
So what do you think about that?
I think that personally, just from the standpoint of having to deal with people wanting things that don't exist yet and things like that, I don't think that rumor sites help. However, they give sort of current photographers a talking point, if nothing else. Gives people a place to go to kind of release their innermost desires of what cameras they want or what specs they want to see and things like that. But the problem is that people have, this is maybe a bit of a broad generality, but I find that a lot of the time on forums and anywhere that you can leave a comment on the internet pretty much, that people take things a little bit too seriously.
Yes, turn up to 11.
That's right. Anyway.
That's true. And obviously, in a world with no rumors, Nikon Report would come out once every quarter.
That's right. Only the news that's actually out and released. And
Absolutely. It would be a very short report.
have nothing to talk about.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's move on to reviews. We had some reviews this week. So we have Richard Won published his in-depth review on Nikon Z9 on his YouTube channel. From all the autofocus things and specifications, yada, 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 that's been discussed to death. One point that he brings out, which I found very interesting, that he says that Z9 feels like DSLR.
Interesting.
So for some of you who are still on the fence and keep holding of your, let's say, DSLR camera, that may be an interesting thing to consider.
Absolutely. We also had a review on DP Review's YouTube channel. They called it the Nikon ZFC review. Did Nikon get retro right? Their ultimate conclusion, or two takeaways from that, is that they feel Nikon needs to support more DX lenses, essentially, and they want a full frame version. As a user of the ZFC, I will agree that a full frame version would be nice, but even now I go back and look through my ZFC pictures from the last few months, and I don't find it lacking in any way.
Yeah. I did find that color science is a little bit different from Z50. So the images do look different, while the sensor is technically the same. Now, I do agree that support of DX lenses is lacking, but obviously from financial point of view, we see why it is the case. And I think, in my opinion, when we talked about opening the mount to other manufacturers, that's the area where you want to get all other manufacturers to get in, because why won't we get Sigma DX lenses? Why won't we get Tamron DX lenses? Just to fill that gap.
Exactly.
But obviously full frame, for a lot of us, that's where it's at. And that's where we would definitely say that, yes, why not? Because if you think about it, a ZFC has been developed. So the mount is there. They can put a full frame sensor and just slightly increase the camera. So if they merge effectively Z5 with ZFC, so then ZF may happen quite soon. And obviously research and development has been done to the camera. So getting a full frame version out shouldn't take very long, in my opinion.
You tell them. I don't think we'll see a full frame version of the ZFC, personally.
No. Why not?
Because let's say the problem that's trying to be solved by producing the ZFC was to get influencers, media content creators, etc., interested in the Z lineup. It's having just spoken to someone the other day, a friend of mine had been looking at a camera to get started with mainly video work, a little bit of stills, wanted something. He liked the cool retro look. If they brought out a ZF and merged it with the Z5 kind of thing, it would be too expensive for it to be that kind of gateway into that system.
So what you're saying is it's not the camera for the masses.
Yeah.
It would be the camera for a very niche audience of photographers like us and who we cater this podcast for.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we are quite a small group compared to the masses.
Yeah, whereas the ZFC was so popular, in part because obviously it had the appeal for existing photographers.
As well as brought more new people.
Yeah, that was really the problem that Nikon were trying to solve, was every product that comes out has to have a purpose. It's not just because like 3 people said they want that, if you see what I mean. It has to be because they need a camera that the masses are going to like, or that is going to be popular with social media content creators, which was the case with the ZFC. The fact that a lot of existing photographers and a lot of our clientele, as well as watchers of the YouTube channel, etc., liked the ZFC and bought it was a happy byproduct, I would say.
That's true.
But it wasn't their intention.
Absolutely. Very valid opinion, Becky. I absolutely agree with you, and I didn't think of that. But actually, yes, I have a question to our viewers. So obviously we come from photographic point of view, and definitely we want ZF because we want that. Think about, let's say, people who don't have a digital camera. Would ZF appeal to them? And obviously price point would be significantly higher than ZFC. What's your opinion on that? So don't think about yourself as photographers. Think, let's say, maybe your parents or maybe your grandparents would buy that camera. Or let's say a friend of yours who doesn't do photography, would they buy full frame ZF camera?
Or children or grandchildren or nieces or nephews.
Absolutely. Do let us know in the comments below. Fantastic. All right, so let's move on to weekend read and watch section. A lot of articles came out, which are called Year in Review. So National Geographic, we will start with that, which is obviously a well-known publication. They publish their year in pictures. We also have New York Times and Guardians as well. So do have a look at them. The Guardian, the article is called The Best Photographs of 2021, and the stories behind them. So it's not only about picture itself, but actually what happened behind the scenes and what actually this image represents. So it's very interesting as well. We also have Shutterstock, who also published their year in review in photographs.
On National Geographic, it's not just the 2021 year in pictures, but they also have the best animals or best family life in 2021. So there's different categories of that as well, which are worth having a look at on the National Geographic website.
Absolutely.
Okay. Next up, we have an article by Petapixel. It's called How the Nikon F Revolutionized Photography. And it's a historical article that talks a lot about not just the time period that the Nikon F came out in, but the reasoning behind it, how design and engineering kind of came together thanks to head engineer Fukita came together with Kamakura, who was a very well-known Japanese designer who'd worked with Nippon Kogaku in the past, and how those two kind of elements of engineering and design blended together to make this incredibly aesthetic and ultimately incredibly iconic product for Nikon.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a long article. What a read.
Yes.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for joining us this week.
Yes, thank you very much for watching and or listening. Please do give us a like and a subscribe on YouTube. Or if you're listening on a podcast platform, a follow, perhaps even a little review. It would be very much appreciated.
Absolutely. We're also available on all sorts of social media.
Yes, but primarily Instagram. You can find me at Rebecca_Denese.
And me at Konstantin Kochkin.
There we go. Thanks very much for watching.
We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.